Good evening, everyone. You got quiet before I even had to ask anyone to be quiet. This is amazing. First and foremost, welcome to the University of Toronto, Mississauga. My name is Linnet Kocheril. I am the Placement and Employer Relations Manager with the Masters of Science in Sustainability Management program here at the University of Toronto, Mississauga. After 2 long years, we're excited to bring this event to you in person. For the previous 2 years, we were able to host this event virtually. And today, before we get to our keynote speaker, I'd like to take this moment to provide a quick land acknowledgement. Many of you at the University of Toronto Mississauga campus are familiar with the land acknowledgement, but as we are here in this space, I want to take this moment to acknowledge this land that the University of Toronto operates on. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Now, many of you may be hearing this for the first time. Others will be hearing this at various events, but I also want to take a moment to acknowledge beyond the land acknowledgement. What does it actually mean? Acknowledging the land is an Indigenous protocol used to express gratitude to those who reside here, to honor the Indigenous people who have lived and worked on this land historically and presently. It allows us the opportunity to appreciate the unique role that we have with the land and its people. Like many of you, I'm a settler on this land. Having come from India, I'm grateful for the opportunity to work and have studied here as well. Although it's important to acknowledge the land, it's only the first step. So as part of the keynote, one of the messages you'll be hearing from our speaker, I'd like to resonate with all of you one more time. And it's to take away these 3 key messages. As students, as faculty, as staff, as guests, what can we do to be integrated onto this land? 3 simple steps. First is learn. Learn about oppression, learn about privilege, about the history of colonization, about the Indigenous people, about their culture. Second, build relationships. At the University of Toronto and the University of Toronto Mississauga, we have the UTM Indigenous Center and various programming initiatives to help students, faculty, staff, and guests learn about the Indigenous people. And most importantly, act. Act towards being accountable to the Indigenous people. Act so that you are affirming the importance of what they're saying and understanding, and take this opportunity as a learning curve as you go through the University of Toronto and the journeys and the programming that we provide to you. So with that, I'd like to invite onto stage Dr. Amrita Danier, Vice Principal and Academic and Dean, to provide a few words of welcome.
Thank you very much, Linnet. Let me welcome you to the Masters in Sustainability Management Leadership Series. I was lucky enough to be able to welcome people before we went remote, and I'm delighted to be able to welcome you tonight. The Masters of Sustainability Management is my favorite program at UTM. It's no secret. And I love the work and the play and the attitude of the students and faculty and staff that are the foundation on which this program lies. We are so lucky that we have this program here. We're so lucky, and I'm grateful for those students and the leadership and the staff. But I'm especially thrilled that tonight we get to hear from such a wonderful speaker. So I'm going to stop talking so that we can get to the real point of this meeting and celebrate the work of this wonderful woman that we're all about to hear from. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Professor Danier. Before we get to our speaker, I'd like to introduce Professor Shashi Kant, who is the founder of the MScSM program and current director of MScSM. Shashi?
Good evening, everybody. and welcome to this special talk, Sustainability Leader Series. We started in second year of the program in 2015, and now we are in 2022. So my greatest challenge today is to introduce our guest speakers, because till now we have a speaker every year, whether online, in person. There was no challenge. You can read their bio and say, oh, what that person is. But this person, I think that bio will not tell you everything. This is a person who have an immense inner strength, not outer strength. She is the person who believes in her inner self, not on outer self. And that impression I got by reading from her book. And you are not going to know her even from her talk unless you read this book. Even her journey from running from Gambia to reach Canada, that itself is so much learning. So I'm not going to give a speech about her, but and just to tell you that she is a person who is there to make a change. Her name, we in India or that part, we pronounce is Toufah. In her part is more pronounced like Toufah, and that means a gift. And normally that is name is given by parents when they find something is not happening in their family and child is born. She is a gift to the world, not only to her family. What she has done at the age of 19, people cannot do throughout their life. They cannot talk, they cannot express themselves. So a few things you may think, why she's here in a Sustainability Leaders Series talk? And sustainability, human rights is one of the biggest issues. Human well-being is one of the biggest issues for sustainability. And that's why she is here. Few more things. We hear the word leaders, leadership. And most of the time, those leaders get strength, not from their inner self, but because of the position they hold. And she is a leader without a title, leadership without a title. Like you cannot say, oh, she's the chief of this or she's the chief of this, but she is the leader, because leaders are those who have a passion, who want to make a change. And in this age already, she has made a change. The other thing is she does not believe in incremental changes. If you see, she has just want to change the system. And that's what she has tried. And she has been quite successful with that one. The other thing, which I will say last thing, is there are no limits for her. Like she does not think what will happen if I do this. She just had that inner strength that I'm going to do it. I'm going to run from my country. It doesn't matter where I will end up. And she did that. And she did it without telling her parents and everything. So that is her real introduction. Other introduction, like she definitely has been a leader of Me Too movement in Africa. When she came out from there, she was just 19 years old, did not even have any degree. And her mother keeps asking her when you will finish her degree. And for her, the degrees does not matter. She will finish for the sake of her mom, but does not matter. She's the author, she's a speaker. And for me, she's just the leader of making the change. And that's what sustainability in this world needs. And with that, I just invite Toufah here for her.
Yeah, a mic malfunction. Hi, good evening, everyone. I had a couple of notes prepared thinking that I was going to stand in one spot, but now I have to move around. So there goes that. My name is Toufah Jallow. Is that working? Oops, there we go. I am a human rights activist and a feminist and a women's rights advocate, a survivor of sexual violence by the most powerful dictator in West Africa a couple of years ago. It's amazing to be in the midst of academia because, as he said, my mother really wants me to produce that degree and I cannot wait for the next 1 year so I can give her my certificate and do with it what you will. I have a very long and personal journey, and being in your midst today, especially students of sustainability or just students in general going to university or college or any learning institution. To bring my experience and my interactions with other people that have had similar experiences into this room, and rooms like this gives me great joy and pleasure and also empowerment, most importantly. I am now 26 years old, a bit older, which is great. I can go out without asking my mom for permission. There we go. Yeah, okay, maybe you can. Yeah, the network is not networking. Oops. There we go. And the broader topic that I'll be talking on is what will it take to sustain the spirit of the Me Too in a world that refuses to recognize women's rights movements as a catalyst for democratization. That is the bigger topic, and that is more academic. And we will get back to that. We will come full circle to that. Well, when I was 18 years old in a small West African country, I grew up in Gambia. We are less than 2 million people. I think we're at 1.9 million people right now. We've been ruled by a dictator for more than 2 decades. That is almost the entirety of my life at the time. And I was coming from a very poor family. I had a brother who was suffering from all sorts of illnesses that we could not trace to. And within my culture and context, you refer to that as a gene or some sort of spiritual entity that is present in his body. And I watched my mother and family walk through all sorts of local remedies and treatments and liquids and early morning births as early as 4 a.m. in the morning. That was my reality. But also growing up in a polygamous family with more than 4 wives, 4 at the time. My father is Muslim, and it is within a Muslim context with siblings and sisters who veiled and followed the rules and being taught that women have a place and a line that we do not cross. So I'm already programmed in that setup. But my sense of caring for another person besides myself came from caring for my brother within a lot of other siblings. I have 22 siblings in total. But then I have a mother who also insisted on going to school, who tried to salvage herself and her mother and her story through education. I think that's why she's insisting on the degree. I drowned myself in drama and school. And I think a lot of students that have gone through academia or school have somehow at some point found school as a way of escaping home, escaping the realities of our families, escaping the realities of our societies, whether we are students traveling from far and abroad, or we're just students within the same community. School and campus can feel like an escape from our reality. And that is what it was for me in high school and primary school. I went to school and I could compete in debate competitions and drama, and that felt very different from what the reality of my household was like. So I drowned myself in that. I focused on that. I wasn't aware of the political reality of my people or the economic reality of my people. My father went to work and he came home and he could bring us snacks and chicken. And for me, we were the rich people within my community. We had water to drink and we had dinner and lunch and breakfast. I didn't know what it took. I wasn't aware of the daily realities of the 4 women who had to live together within all the intricacies of love and power and the dynamics of polyamory in that context. I just wanted to go to school and escape taking care of my brother. So I finished school with so much hope, because every time I represented my school, my class, I was a young woman who was able to express what I felt, was able to defend positions like, a doctor is better than a teacher, or a nurse is better than a doctor. Those tiny positions, but I felt so empowered as a young person in a culture and society that a lot of other girls and young women do not have the opportunity to go to school, do not have the opportunity to go and represent their schools. So for me, in that context, I was the empowered girl. I was the girl who stopped wearing the hijab as soon as I started going to Arabic school, as soon as I started going to English school from Arabic school. But then I did. I finished school with a mother that told me I was empowered enough that my no's matter. And if I say no, it meant no. And my years were certain. But they were not. I finished high school. I didn't want to go to high school because I didn't want to go to college, because our college did not offer a lot of options. It was either you were going to be a teacher, a doctor, or very specific careers that you could indulge in. And I wanted to do performance arts. I wanted to be a theater kid. But my country has only one college and one university, and your options are very limited. So when I heard that there was a scholarship pageant to be won, and what this pageantry meant was that of academia, you showcase your talent and then you will tell the country what you will do in your various platforms. And mine was to alleviate poverty within my community, because I understood what that was like. I participated with vigor. I gave my best performance. Trust me, I fell on the floor. Excited and believing that I am one of those young people within that context who could escape the trap of these very binary options of teacher or higher school teacher. So I performed and I won. And the position I had is equivalent to Miss Gambia, meaning you are the Miss Gambia, you are the inspiration and the role model for all young girls within the country. And I looked forward to the possibilities of what could be, imagining myself in a foreign country and a university where everything is paid for as promised by the government. A dictatorship that actually kills and maims and murders people and political opponents. But I do not know that. I'm not that, because I am leaving, I think the next one. I am 2 seconds away from abandoning this technology. And that's me, because that is my reality. not what the dictator is doing, who he is brutalizing political opponents, who's supposed to be what democracy meant at the time. It was the same man on our TV screens every single day. I was born in 1996. He came to power in 1994. So we're supposed to elect who? Democracies? What are you talking about? You know, I just wanted to sit next to my mother. This is a kitchen, and I'm just trying to help her do stuff from the outside. Next slide, please. That is the president on the day that he seized power in the Gambia in 1994. So it was a military coup 2 years before I was born. A man who has also robbed soldiers with the most powerful people in the world. So the United Nations, American presidents, or the presidents around the world. Other powerful institutions that validated his essence and power. And I want you to think about this dynamic and think about me at that age. I don't know what international relations is. I don't know what dictators are. I don't know what it means to be at that height of power, standing at the United Nations, representing an entire country, a country when you say lock, it locks, a country where you can control communication, data, information, research, people, what the media says and what they do not say. The ultimate power. Instead of going to school, I won back again. I won the pageant, excited. Can we go back to, yeah, that one. Looking forward to going to any university in the world. And then I met the dictator. This is the meeting point. From a young, naive girl who just wanted to escape chores at home. And my brother, I just wanted to go to school and compete, and I just wanted to go study. But I met the dictator, and to be honest, he was a fatherly figure, just like many powerful men, the essence of grooming and bringing you in and empowering you in a way to make you feel like you're different, you're other than, your skills are respected and seen and valued. And what I tried to do over the years is never to diminish that moment of how I felt or where I was, because that, on that day, is everything a young person around the world should feel like in the presence of the people that are supposed to protect and empower you. And instead, I was violated by the most powerful person I have ever heard existed in my life. So I'll read a prologue from my book to give you a sense of where I have been from that moment and from experiencing that, how it contrasts to what the rest of the world is trying to tell me. It is December 2020. I sit in front of a computer screen with my friend and colleague, Marion Volkman, watching the rough edit of a short documentary we are producing together. Over the course of 25 minutes, clips of me competing in a 2014 Gambian scholarship pageant are intercut with images of the man who ruled my country for more than 2 decades. An all-powerful dictator whose death squad murdered and tortured at his command. Clips of powerful men from other countries appear as well. Harvey Weinstein, who used his position in the film industry to intimidate women into having sex with him. Jeffrey Epstein, who trafficked teenage girls and young women. Mexican drug lord El Chapo, who declared that young girls were his vitamins because raping them gave him life. Should I add allegedly? It has been 6 years since I was declared the winner of a national pageant sponsored by my country's president, promised a scholarship to study anywhere in the world as my prize. Instead, Yaya Jammeh raped me. I became a victim in the Gambia, a fugitive in Senegal, and then a refugee in Canada. At 19, I started my life over, a survivor of rape, separated from my family, afraid I would never see them again. Worried they would suffer if I told anyone what happened to me. But should I add, allegedly? As I rebuilt my life 7,000 kilometers away from the country I'd grown up in, I struggled with depression, with my secret, with loneliness. And then the dictator whose crimes had forced me to flee was deposed and driven out of the Gambia himself. I was able to return to reunite with my family and eventually tell my story to human rights investigators, to the international media like BBC, New York Times, The Guardian, and etc. But people keep telling me I should always say allegedly. The strange thing is people and institutions aren't as adamant that allegedly be attached as a qualifier when they speak of murders ordered by Jammeh, when they talk of torture carried out at his instructions, when they detail financial crimes committed as he drained the country's coffers. No one attaches allegedly, even to his claims of curing cancer and AIDS. This insistence on using allegedly when it comes to rape can't be explained away as simply protecting the rights of those convicted. Because the word isn't just attached to the person named as perpetrator, it is attached to the crime itself. He allegedly raped her, morphs into she was allegedly raped. And it isn't something that happens only in the Gambia, only with Jammeh. As I watched the news in my small apartment in Toronto, I noticed the same tendency in reports about other crimes in Canada and abroad. When men say they were beaten or assaulted, the word allegedly is rarely inserted. When someone says they've been robbed, allegedly, almost is never inserted. It never appears. But when a woman says she was raped, her assertion is often framed as she claimed she was raped or she was allegedly raped. Whether in the Gambia or Canada or the United States or the United Kingdom, when women say they were raped, the men they accuse are given the benefit of the doubt, always. And the women, they're simply doubted. When my country's Truth Commission set out to tabulate Jammeh's crimes, they continued this cross-cultural tradition. In October 2019, they published a list of themes for an upcoming round of hearings and only attached the word alleged to sexual violence, not to the torture or the killings, not to the arrest or the literal witch hunts. When it came to witness testimony, the names of those accused of other crimes were broadcast and published. But with the exception of Jammeh himself, witnesses were instructed to refer to the rapist by a number corresponding to their names. Doubts benefit rapists. It keeps them anonymous. Some rape victims remain anonymous too, giving evidence on the pseudonyms. A few testified under their names, but asked that their faces not be shown at all. And I understood. In the Gambia, as in many parts of Africa and the Western countries too, to say you have been raped places you at risk of stigma and further harm. One of the victims testifying before the Truth Commission was raped as a teenager, then forced into an arranged marriage afterwards to save her family's honor. Her rapist wasn't punished, but she was. After I was raped, I didn't tell my mother until months after it happened. I thought it would be a secret that would die with me. Instead, It became a secret that almost killed my spirit, almost killed me. But now I want people to see me, to know my name, to see someone who has been raped, stand proud, be strong. Survivors are strong, even those that remain hidden. They have to be strong to still be here with us, to move on, to thrive. I want girls like I used to be, girls who do not know what rape is, do not even have the words to describe it, to see that you can survive this journey through the unknown, to see a visible survivor, to see that I have survived, and to find strength in that knowledge. And I want rapists to carry the same so often placed on victims. In the days and weeks and months after I spoke out, others in the Gambia spoke out as well, sharing their stories of Me Too, galvanizing a moment and speaking about sexuality and sexual parts and the violations that happened to them in the streets. In June 2015, Yahya Jammeh, then the president of the Gambia, raped me. He has never been charged, never convicted. And because of that, the world thinks I should use the word allegedly. I won't. He thought he would get away with it, tried to erase me. I thought I would never speak of it, that I would remain invisible. But you know, the funny thing is, not so funny, we were both wrong, because I am here shining like the melanated star in the coast of West Africa. And to me, language is so important. And it has been the center of my advocacy and work. Because I grew up in a culture where rape doesn't have a word. The luxury of saying I've been raped and everyone understands what it is not how it works in my culture. When I want to tell you someone has raped me, it sounds like someone fell between my thighs, someone touched my thighs, someone fell on me. It erases the cruelty of the act itself. And so we get away with it. So we have a lot of young girls that grow up not understanding how to describe parts of their body, talk less of describing harm that has been done to them. And since coming out, what has stood out to me in telling my story is the intersectionality of feminism and the ideas of feminist theories around the world. You see, one of the reasons why I wrote my book, or why I started thinking out loud, was having my people within my culture tell me that I wasn't Gambian enough, that I wasn't African enough, because I am disrespecting a culture that so sacredly holds sex and sexuality and acts of sex, even if they are violence. And you have this other part of the world that is telling me that I only garnered the courage to put my veil away, to speak up, to run away from my perpetrator because of the mercy of Canada or Western civilization. And the thing is, I felt so lost within these two narratives because there's a middle ground. There's a more nuanced story in between. And that is, my first no to the most powerful man in my country came from a sense of ownership, of self, of who I was and how much I can contribute to the world. Of all the times my mom told me my yes mattered or my no should be respected. Yeah, you can say partly me saying no was out of naivety of not knowing the man could literally kill me. But then I ran away. I snuck in a boat, crossed an Atlantic river in a wooden boat. This is the exact boat that transported me from the Gambia into the part of Senegal. So Senegal and Gambia is like, let's say, Canada, New York, but in the context of, let's say, Niagara Falls being the border. And you just have to cross through that water to find yourself in Buffalo. And this was my option because I had a tyranny and a dictator hunting for a young 19-year-old who refused to marry him and refused to answer his calls again after he had already raped me. Why is it important to tell these stories within the context of democracy and sustainability? Is that often we are so carried away in academia and statistics, logistics, that we do forget the human story. That the statistics and the numbers are only possible because we have resilient human beings that are good at storytelling, human beings that are willing to stand every single time to defend what is common between all of us. And as someone who came from that background, to finding myself at the center of the Me Too movement, I live in Canada. I've lived in Canada for the past 6 years. And yes, I came in as a protected person after being homeless, fleeing home. I lived in Senegal for some time, and Canada was part of the countries that accepted me as a protected person and a refugee. So I had to go through the immigrant story. I found Toronto from a map that was put in front of me, and the IOM, which is International Organization for Migrants, Lamine is his name. And he said to me, "This is Canada. What city would you like to go to?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'm just trying to run away from someone who wants to murder me." And he's like, "Oh, Toronto is diverse, and the workforce," whatever the idea of Toronto was at the time. And he circled it because Vancouver sounded cold. Other places were like, "Ugh." But diversity, that idea sounded good to me. And we mapped it on a map, and that was it. So I found myself in a big city that I never anticipated, never researched, never had the luxury of picking what area, east, west, south, north. The lingo, the language, the geography, the dynamic of being an immigrant survivor of violence, running away from a dictatorship in a small West African country that majority of you and Canadians don't know about. But that is where the intersection of our struggles come in. And that in sustaining our way forward in any of these fields requires paying attention to that. It requires wondering and thinking about the backgrounds of the people and the communities we are trying to see move forward into this new reality. So when I find myself in the Me Too conversation at the center of it, being a phase of West Africa's or Gambia's Me Too movement, I have to constantly remind myself that the world's interest in me, whether it's the New York Times, or whether it's the BBC, or whatever news outlets really gave me attention, did not do it because of who I am as a person, or the 19-year-old or family background from West Africa. This reality that the attention on victims and survivors is based on the status of their perpetrators has to be acknowledged. Because Jammeh is a powerful dictator who rubs shoulders with powerful people. It's one of, if not the main reason why the world paid attention to me. Because there are so many Toufahs, so many people out there whose rapists are not as powerful, so the attention sifts away. I remember I never wanted to talk about what happened to me. I wanted to go to school in Canada, figure out northbound from southbound and just not get lost. And like what university to go to. I tried other cities. I went to Douglas College in Vancouver, just trying to find me and my identity away from what actually brought me here. Finding myself in a women's refugee shelter, surrounded by people, especially in 2014, 15, people that are fleeing Syria. And we will have these circles where they introduce themselves and they will say, oh, I flee, I lost 5 of my family members in a bomb, and I lost my husband, I lost my kids. All these stories that felt like immigrant stories to me, people that are worthy to be in this country. And I'm just sitting there in the midst of all of that and saying, well, me? You know, like, what do I say? I've been raped by a dictator. That's why I'm here in this shelter with you. Feeling like my immigrant story is not immigranty enough. It's not a story of fleeing literal war, not fitting in, even in a shelter for immigrants. That dynamic, having to want to call back home, but the phone calls that are available in immigrant centers only call within Canada. I don't have a family member in Canada. I want to call abroad. But having to feel like you have to be so grateful for whatever setup you find, because lucky you that you're here. So running away from that salvation story that Canada salvaged you, and running away from that narrative from my people that you're only able to speak for yourself because you made it to Canada, felt so unsettling for me. Because then it made me ask the questions, where did the first no come from? Where did the runaway come from? Where is this instinct of like, I would rather be homeless and dead and stateless than be repeatedly violated by this man? Where did that come from? And it's from these individual stories and sense of resistance and nuance and intersectionality that is where the bigger conversation of sustaining the global progress comes in. And all of these individual stories are made louder and clearer, not because I can speak better, not because I can bring forth a lot of these stories. And sometimes I wish I can share all the stories of the women I've walked with, whether it's at the International Criminal Court at The Hague, whether it's in Gambia or just around the world, or just women movements that are trying to move us forward. But is that somehow, unfortunately, we are very much interested in the more visible stories. And for me, over the years, if it's going back to Gambia or telling my story or leading the Me Too movement, is the picture on the left here impacting more lives than the picture on the right. Because the picture is on the right is me at the International Criminal Court advocating for the eradication of this pretense nuance that we have when it comes to holding perpetrators of sexual violence accountable. But this one, there's a couple of young girls that I've dedicated the past few years to, in empowering them, in talking to them about body autonomy and how much they can participate and contribute in their own communities, represent their own countries, and have a voice on a bigger global scale. But what I've also learned is, whether it's these young girls on this side or young girls in Canada, in Taipei, all around the world, have very, very, very similar stories. And I think that is what the Me Too movement has done for us. That is what it has reflected, is that from our very different backgrounds, from our very different experiences, one thing is very similar for women around the world, is how we struggle within power dynamics. Is no matter how high up we go, or no matter how many promises we've been made from our great-grandparents to us, we still struggle with maintaining, with having our boundaries, especially physically and sexually, being respected. And this idea that we are sexual beings just refusing to go away, and therefore blocking every other pathway to other identities and transgender women and all other female identifying folks. But it's also very irresponsible, I've learned over the years, to tell these young girls they can be anything, their nose can be respected and their yes is valued when we don't have space, safe spaces for them. Then you are left with like a bunch of young women that are empowered and enlightened and holding on to their yes and no as a badge of honor, working with, interacting with a group of young men who have not been taught that, or who are taking a longer time to accept that. So you have a bunch of disappointed young girls. You have a lot of girls like I have felt that my society and my mother has failed me. And it took me a very long time to look back at these very incremental points in my history, in my culture's history, that allows me to be here today, that allowed me to say that first no, when I looked at a dictator and said, "You kidding me? You want to marry who, me? No, I'm 18. What are you talking about?" That delusional, fiery, empowered young girl. Is that, and that brings me to this middle ground where both of these walls are trying to put me in, and that is, there is an intersection, so many intersecting points. And I would be so delusional, the systems and organizations and the establishment would be, if we try to separate modern feminism, Western feminism, with African feminisms or resistance, because they're so all intertwined. We cannot forget context when we're thinking about how we can start movements or sustain them, or how we can start ideas or sustain them. We cannot leave context behind. It is so integral to how we understand it, and is so integral to how we move forward within it. I am a victim of looking at my grandmother like, "You're so archaic." I am like the radical feminist. But my grandmother choosing to stay behind, sell fruits and food in the streets to provide for her family, to insist that her daughter goes to school in a culture that tells her her daughter's education is not important, while she watches all her neighbors send their girls to like get married to the richest man or the most flamboyant boy in the community. That is peak resistance for someone that has never traveled within the confines of that context. The ability to hold feminist theology and our idea of what feminists are not, it is so essential in order for us to move forward or recognize all forms of feminist resistance. My mother being born out of that, yes. She went to school in the morning as a student, came home as a wife, given to a man she never knew or accepted or chose. But once she found herself in that, insisting on going to school, having a private abortion where there's no anesthesia, going through all of that to build and mold her own future. to be married with other 4 wives, but still trying to craft her way around the setup and say, I'm going to take 2 days to cook and I'm going to take 3 days to go to school. Managing that complexity, I couldn't do that. And it's so unfair to not recognize that feminist theory, to not see that as a feminist resistance. Just because the person accepted or allowed themselves to be married in a polygamous family with 22 other kids and 3 other wives or 4. Somehow within that context, they managed to go to university. They managed to give birth to a child like me and put in my head that I could say no to the most powerful man. How unfair it is to not recognize that feminist movement and that feminist resistance. Just because my feminism is louder and it's in English and it's pronounced and it's in all these fancy swirly words, still doesn't negate that feminist experience. So I want you to think today, as you think about sustaining the Me Too movement, to think about the countries and cultures that do not have the words for rape, that do not have the words for Me Too, and that condensing our idea of sustaining global development somehow resides in the languages we understand and within the cultures that we grow up in, is not going to do much for the global movement. And that the power in sustaining whatever it is that we're aspiring for would require our ability to step out of our shoes, to hear my story, to listen to girls like that who might not be able to speak as eloquently, who are shy of their sex and sexuality. Do we have next? Yeah. Next again? Yeah. That it is one thing to start a movement. And I am all excited for the Me Too movement or the hashtag I am Toufah and all the many movements around the world. But what has perplexed me for so long, especially this year, and I am a nerd for feminist history, is how we have refused to recognize feminist revolutions as a catalyst for moving forward, whether it's for democratization, whether it's for justice, whether it's for freedom. Right now, Iran is a great example. The bigger questions and conversations we're having in Iran is coming from a single narrative. The single narrative of Mahsa Amini. Mahsa Amini representing thousands of women, not only women in her generation, but generations before her. And out of that, a bigger political discourse. Out of that, what is possible for Iran? Iran's participation on the global stage. Sustaining progress or the human condition in one part of the world might feel good if you exist only within that perimeter. But as someone that exists in 2 walls, I live in Canada and I live in the Gambia now. Why? Because feminist movements, me and a lot of other women came together to take out this dictator. It's a women's movement that took out a dictator, and now we can talk about human rights violations, murder, torture of journalists, and even make it to the international stage. But it took women first in center to that movement. But now that I can go home, I can clearly see the distinction between the 2 walls because I am in Canada. A queer Black woman, a survivor of rape and violence, a student, a worker, and all these many things, an immigrant. There are rights that I enjoy here so much that I lose sight of how much a difference it makes once you cross the border. I land in Gambia, I am taming myself. I am boxing myself. I am questioning my dress code, my language. Who do I talk back to? Who I do not talk back to? I'm a big feminist, but I am still trying to consider my life. I jump on a flight, 6 hours later, my life is drastically different. The concept of having a global world where jumping on a flight doesn't change your rights completely. And it's so crazy that we are so comfortable with that reality that I could hang out in here, University of Toronto, Mississauga, say whatever, do whatever. I could go to the airport, jump on a flight, a few hours later, completely, because my life is on the line. So until we can measure progress in that bigger context, our progress is still very, 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 very limited. Next again, I don't know. You know, that is like a generation of, and this is how I think about sustainability. I think of sustainability in very small portions. And maybe that's because that's how my brain can process it. And there's this idea every single time that we want to change a narrative or move forward, we are told it is too nuanced or too difficult. When you scroll back years ago, when you talked about liberating slaves, you would hear conversations like, oh, it's so difficult. How are we going to integrate back into a flowing economy without slaves? How are we going to like create these channels and ways to function as a society and a world without slaves? Oh my God, what are we going to do? Oh my God, it's so difficult. Let's just leave it as it is. You come to having, you know, given rights to natives of various lands, and they're like, yeah, we took it and we developed it so much. We have all these residential schools. If we're just to stop, how do we reintegrate back? How do we continue? One thing an establishment always does is present unnecessary nuance and complications and the idea of panic or how difficult something is in order to not have it happen. Let's have women vote. Oh my God, how are we going to add them to the rooster? How are we going to add them to the voting blogs? It's a lot of work to do. But here we are. And the truth is, right now, in this moment, the establishment, society and culture is trying to make it seem like the Me Too conversation is very nuanced. It's very difficult to process. Oh my God, what do we do? Is it when I touch your arm? Is it when I touch your leg? Trying to introduce unnecessary nuance to show how impossible it is to live in a world where the ideals of Me Too are visible, seen, respected, and then we incorporate it into our daily lives. So the distractions is a lot. People will tell you, I'm sure you've seen videos or commentaries of people sounding like, yeah, but you know, I don't know, what is Me Too? Is it like when I touch your neighbor, we cannot talk to girls anymore? We cannot share in the same room. Let me stay away. Trying to just incorporate unnecessary discomfort in a conversation and an idea that is very, very, very clear. I refuse to be told it's not. But we have to recognize that it's not new. the establishment has done this over and over and over again when it comes to giving rights, responsibility, or recognition or respecting different individuals. One of the things that I'm most proud of in all the work that I do, or all the young girls that I mentor, all the advocacy that we do, and even a bill that we changed back home, and now we can talk about rape. Now we have a lingo. When you say Toufah, people know that you're talking about violence and rape. Is this nuanced group of people the same thing I am against and for at the same time? Having a father that I admired and looked up to for so many years because he was the powerhouse. And now knowing what I know within my context, trying very hard not to inflate this group with my anger towards grouping women together in a way that they didn't consent to fully, but also like seeing the joy in their faces. In this picture is my dad at the front, a bunch of siblings, wives, in me, the now Canadian, Gambian, internationally influenced person whose perspective do not fit any of those molds. But having to respect that and thinking about how to sustain the economic, the cultural and social perspectives of all of these people in their context, and not feeling the need and the desire to sift them from that context into another, only for me to make sense of it. Because often it's like, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what to do with all of that nuance. A man that I know stands for everything and marries all these women because the culture has given him the power to do so. All of these women that accepted the circumstance, but also have sent their kids to school, and that I am in the midst of all of this because of their feminist resistance. And that they have the reproductive liberty to give birth as much as they want. And to look at that and see a community of young women that I can inspire now. Because all the younger ones, besides the bigger ones in the back, none of them have to go through FGM because I exist. But I exist because of the woman in the yellow head wrap. So sustaining my feminist movement, the bigger Me Too conversation, social justice in general, or democratizing countries that have gone through dictatorships, have to really invest and think about all the nuanced different family dynamics and cultures. And today that I am here, how many minutes am I in? Okay. I wanted to bring the human conversation, the many stories, you know, and having to do work in Canada or back home is just clearly seeing the need, the difference, but also not diminishing any of it. You know, I live in Canada where we deal with cases of rape kits that are not being tested and they just left in police stations for months and years and decades. And then I go back to work with girls in Gambia where there's no rape kits in the hospitals. Zero. When you go and report rape, the police officers are laughing at you or even soliciting you sexually. There is no pathway to reporting rape, for taking your samples, none of that. I sit within rooms in Canada where we talk about 1 in 5 statistics, numbers, because research has been done. But where I come from, there's no research because there's no one talking about it. And I think as people that are trying to sustain any type of area in human development, to sit for a moment and realize that we know what we know because of data, because of information and stuff we have collected, is why we know, okay, oh, so this is a bigger problem. Okay, this is what the numbers are. But what happens in a world where there's no willingness to give numbers? Where there isn't data, does it mean no data equals to no form of developing or rescuing or sustaining any form of progress? How do we walk around establishments and cultures and scenarios in which what we rely on, data? Because I really do feel like there's an over-reliance on data and research. It is great, I totally agree, especially in academia. But it's time we think about how data and research, just the consideration of those, neglects a huge scope of the human population. And what strength, what expertise do we bring into those spaces without the data and research we're equipped with in this context? I think I would let go of you with just a couple of thoughts. And that is, being within institutions, from my observation, whether it's academia or the legal system, the ICC, governments, there's a lot of insistence on the technicalities of things, mostly. And for a lot of humanity that are trying to thrive within those institutions, even if they come in first with a lot of passion for the human story and connection, it's so easy to lose that because, you know what, before I connect with human beings, I need to get like my grades and graduate. I need to get this technical part out of the way first. And often I've seen so many people in rooms that have gone through the technical parts and the degrees and the theory, that by the time they're done, they're so worn out, so drained, so technical that they cannot connect with the human story. And I wanted to bring you the human story today because there are thousands of Toufahs out there. And we have to recognize, in sustaining the bigger global movement or progress centering minority groups, especially women movements and revolutions around the world, is going to propel us forward. And in as diverse as we can do that, as nuanced as we can do that, the more is going to impact the world as a global community. Thank you. Sorry? Yeah. Thank you.
What an amazing, amazing address. One of the messages I just want to emphasize was thank you for being a voice for so many who are voiceless in our community, on this planet, and for being that inspiration and leader. We do have a few minutes for Q&A. So if you have a question, we have a mic on either end of the aisle. You're welcome to step up. We have about 5 minutes. And for those of you who are joining us virtually on Zoom, if you have a question, please feel free to use the Q&A function and we'll be able to read out your questions at that point. If you have a question, you're welcome to come up.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. So hi, and thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm also a fellow West African. I'm from Guinea, and everything you said, a lot of things you said were so relatable. Having family members that have multiple wives. My granddad had like 3 wives, so I really can relate to that. I also am a political science major, and I'm hoping to pursue a career in journalism. So I wanted to ask you, Toufah, in your process and in your experience, in terms of Gambian journalism, do you think it helped you? Do you think they shunted you? Or do you think it was more of like they were indifferent? Like, how do you think journalism has played a part in your story and how things ended up unfolding? Thank you very much.
Thank you. What's your name?
Odia.
Odia. Okay. My dad is from Guinea, by the way. That's his
Oh,
brother.
really?
Yeah.
Nice.
You know, again, it shows the difference of studies and experience that journalists have depending on where they live. In Gambia, it was, the media is not as regulated, meaning they're not as accountable. So majority of the media houses become most like blogs in a way, like they can say whatever. They're not fearing being sued or going through any sort of legal repercussions. So they can be very loose in the way they interact. But again, being a journalist and you studied in that same country and culture, you act as you've been, nurtured. So they are a part of that culture, and it shows in their practice as well. Just very recently, most of the media houses in Gambia continue to call me a beauty pageant. Like I've done so much work, but whenever they refer to me, it's like beauty pageant. I'm like, huh? Like, I never, just because I participated in a scholarship pageant. So in some ways, yes, they have extended the story to like the local community, and especially in the provincial areas where you have a lot of people that are not educated. But I had to do a lot of work, going to a lot of radio stations that are more present in the local communities to speak in my language, to be able to translate what I'm trying to say in English into those languages as well. But I've always been short, misinterpreted by a lot of the media in Gambia. But again, you have to remember most of the media is run by powerful men, majority are men. So I'm not only a threat to the Jammeh or the presidency or those powerful people, it comes down. So every other powerful person who knows they're doing something similar don't like you in general. But I've always used the international media a lot to kind of take the Gambian context and just broaden it a bit more. But I still struggle with the Gambian media. But thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions on the floor? Do we have room for one more? Yep.
Hi. Thank you for your compelling story. My name is Mena Wogu. I'm from Nigeria. And so I can attest to relating to your personal story, on a West African context, right? And I'm in the MScSM program, class 2024. I don't have like a question, or rather, I just want like you to help me understand, how do you take your personal story as a tool, navigating two extremes of different global contexts, and how do you use that to propagate the power of your personhood, right? And ensuring along the process that your story in its purest form is not lost in its context or in its substance, when you're talking about achieving sustainable development, when you're talking about, championing women's rights, when you talk about, upholding people's integrity and dignity. Yeah, how do you ensure that transition? or translation. if
Do you
like.
think I am? Answering that the translation. Thank you so much. I don't know. I found power in recognizing how not so unique my story is, you know, and having to, you know, before the abuse happened with the dictator, this was a man who looked at me, and I believed that it was my potential as a speaker or to translate what I am feeling, or let's say when I was talking about alleviating poverty, that made me want that pageant in the first place. So being in that position of winning that competition, I felt like I earned it, right, as a person and in my ability to make that connection. So when the dictator looked at me and said, you have so much potential, you know, and he was a father figure in the beginning, you know, he told me, you have so much potential. I cannot wait for you to go and study and come back and serve the country. I believed that narrative. But only when I showed him my potential and ability to stand my ground, did I have to get punished for that. And for a long time, I did not find myself. I was a very silent person in the streetcars of Toronto. I would not talk to anybody. I didn't know what to say. I did not fit in. I don't know how to introduce myself or even tell anybody why I am here in the first place. So a lot of my ability to connect my personal story to just a larger global conversation is having to deeply realize that I am not a unique story, that my story comes in different forms and patterns. It's like the idea of living many lives as a spirit, but you live it in different characters, right? And for me, is to just realize that. And every time I listen to other women, and this is what happens when I shared my story, I got a lot of feedback. You know, I don't think I was this vast in connecting my individual story to the global conversation the first time I spoke out. But in speaking out, as you can imagine, there are thousands and thousands of women around the world that come to you, that confide in you. You become a soaking sponge for so many stories. And that helped me. So speaking out, it might help other women to speak out, but it also helped me not run with that narrative of, oh, it must be only me. I'm such a single, unique narrative. And in them sharing with me, over the years, I'm able to connect the bigger picture. And now I think I'm stronger than ever, and I can speak anywhere or fight for any cause on that front, because I am so in tune with the bigger picture, because I've heard from women almost all around the world. And that connecting dot, that similarity of not only what happened, but who we are and what we want is so important for me. And knowing that we live in a world where a lot of us have been victimized, and a lot of us are being victimized and will be victimized. We have to find a way to turn victims into survivors and leaders is the only way to move forward. And I stand in this place, like even now, just to tell you a secret, before I came in here, I used the washroom a couple of times. And the last 2 times I use it is me just standing in a mirror and trying to channel all the faces of the different women I have met, and why the story is more of a human story than a technical one. And when I find myself in a room like this, I can make that connection because I'm no longer selflessly an individual story. My story is tying into a bigger, and maybe that's why it comes off that way.
Perfect. So at this point, I'd like to welcome Professor Soo-Min To to provide some closing remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linnet. Toufah, I don't think you're allowed to leave yet. I'm gonna have to give you a gift, so just hang on for a second. Okay. Thanks. So I guess you know, I would just like to again express a few words of gratitude, Toufah. I first came across your book as a gift from Shashi. He gave it to me for my birthday, and he's like, "You got to read this book." And I read it, and you know, I remember just being blown away. And we talked about your story and your courage and your journey for days. We kept talking, we kept going back to how is it that one person could overcome just unimaginable adversity to be here. And for you to be standing here in front of us today is just, my mind is completely blown. So thank you for your story. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for your book and for for your courage, because it certainly inspired me. I think about you when I'm making decisions and feeling terrified about the things I have to decide. I'm like, what am I doing? And so I thank you for that. And I'm sure on behalf of everyone who's here, the MScSM and IMI, and the guests who are here, I know we all feel this sense of gratitude to you, and we are with you in your journey as your story continues to unfold, and you are part of us now, absolutely. And so thank you so much. Yes, sir.
All right, so that brings us to the end of our keynote, and we're going to be opening up the atrium now. Before I do, just few quick words of gratitude and thank you as well. As you go out of the IB 120, on the left-hand side, you'll see a bunch of poster presentations. And those poster presentations are representative of our class of 2023 MScSM students who completed their internships over the summer. On the screen, you'll see various employers who have been long-standing partners with the MScSM program who took on an intern this summer, and our students really appreciated the opportunity and the experience. I also wanted to take a moment to congratulate the students themselves. So all 39 of you, some of you who are actually joining us virtually in Europe. I know it's late there, so thank you for bearing with us. We're in Copenhagen, University of Lund, and in Geneva. Thank you for tuning in. And thank you for your amazing work that you did. And for the class of 2024, we're going to be pursuing your internship in the coming semester. Take this opportunity to learn from your senior students, the experiences, and for all of our guests who are here, take this opportunity to learn of the work that they had completed over the summer. Is it going to the next screen? Could you just, perfect. And then last but not least, this is not a one-person show. As we like to call it, it's the MScSM family, but larger, it's the IMI family. I want to take this opportunity to thank a lot of people who are listed on the screen and some who may not be listed on the screen for putting this event together. Like I mentioned, it's been 2 years since we've been able to do an in-person event, but a special thank you to the UTM leadership, Professor Marita Danier, Professor Alex Gillespie, along with Deborah Brown from the CAO's office for helping us put this event together. Thank you to the MScSM team and as well as the IMI team, Sarah, Claire, Ryan, Winnie, and of course, Professor Shashi Kant. A special thank you to our UTM partners, INITS, so Jermaine, who's to the left of me, along with our caretaking team and conference services team. Our sustainability office, we have our team over there on the side. A big shout out to the Tri-Campus team for supporting this activity and this event. And of course, thank you, Toufah, for joining us. We do have an opportunity for book signing, which will be right outside of this room. So for those of you who may have joined a little later and were not able to get a copy of Toufah's book, please just join us at the front desk. We're happy to provide you with one. And that's it. Enjoy the rest of your evening and have a good one.